Marcus Chen's eyes opened to the familiar taste of copper and smoke. His combat implant buzzed weakly against his skull, struggling to maintain basic life support functions. The ceiling above him was wrong, too smooth, too clean, with soft blue lighting that didn't belong in any human facility he knew. Pain shot through his ribs as he tried to sit up. The last thing he remembered was the explosion that had torn through the civilian transport ship. Pirates had attacked the vessel while it traveled through the Kepler Passage, a supposedly safe trade route between human and Zalani space. Marcus had been traveling as a passenger, trying to forget the war that had ended 6 months ago, when the attack began. "Stay still, human. Your wounds are severe." The voice was melodic, almost like wind chimes, but carried an authority that made Marcus freeze. A tall, elegant creature glided into his field of vision. The being had pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light, with elongated limbs and large, dark eyes that held ancient wisdom. This was a Zalani, one of the galaxy's most advanced species. "Where am I?" Marcus asked, his voice rough from smoke inhalation. "You are aboard the medical vessel Serenity's Grace. I am Healer Vashati. You were found floating in an escape pod with—" The healer paused, her expression shifting to something Marcus couldn't quite read. "With a child." Memories rushed back like a flood. The pirates boarding the transport, civilians screaming, the ship's hull being breached, and then, in the chaos, he had seen her, a small figure huddled behind overturned cargo crates. Tears streaming down her face as armed raiders moved through the ship. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old by human standards, though her species was unfamiliar to him. Her skin was a soft lavender color, and she had 4 arms instead of 2. Her large golden eyes had locked onto his in that moment of terror, and something in Marcus's chest had snapped into place. The same protective instinct that had kept him alive through 3 years of brutal warfare. "The girl," Marcus said, struggling to sit up despite the pain. "Is she safe?" Healer Vashati's expression softened slightly. "She is physically unharmed. However, she has not spoken since we brought you both aboard. She refuses to leave your side. We had to treat you in the same room because she became distressed when we tried to separate you." Marcus looked around the medical bay and spotted her immediately. The small alien child sat in a chair beside his bed, her 4 hands folded in her lap. She was staring at him with those impossibly large golden eyes, and Marcus could see the tracks of dried tears on her purple cheeks. "Hey there, little one," Marcus said softly, the same tone he had used with his younger sister back on Earth before the war had taken everything from him. "How are you feeling?" The child didn't respond, but her lower lip trembled slightly. "Her name is Zara," Healer Vashati explained. "She is Nitherian. Her family was traveling to establish a new colony when the pirates attacked. As far as we can determine, she is the only survivor." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew that feeling, the hollow ache of being the last one left. He had felt it when his unit was wiped out on Kepler 442b, when he crawled out of that burning dropship as the only survivor of 43 good soldiers. "Zara," he said gently, testing the name. The child's ears twitched slightly, small, pointed things that reminded him of flower petals. "My name is Marcus. Do you remember me?" She nodded once, barely perceptible. Marcus remembered the rescue more clearly now. He had been making his way to the escape pods when he heard her crying. The pirates had been sweeping through the ship systematically, and he knew they wouldn't spare civilian lives. They never did. He had found her hiding behind those crates, paralyzed with fear as the sounds of violence grew closer. Getting her to the escape pod had been a nightmare. The ship was coming apart around them, gravity fluctuating wildly as the artificial generators failed. Marcus had carried her, her 4 small arms wrapped around his neck as he ran through corridors filled with smoke and debris. He remembered the moment when the ship's reactor went critical. The escape pod's launch system had been damaged, and Marcus had to manually override the release mechanism. He had been halfway through the process when the explosion hit, sending them spinning into the void. The last thing he remembered was pulling Zara against his chest, using his body to shield her from the debris that peppered their tiny pod. "You saved her life," Healer Vashati said, as if reading his thoughts. "The pod's life support systems were failing when we found you. You had given her your emergency oxygen supply. She would not have survived without your intervention." Marcus looked at Zara again. She was still watching him with those large, solemn eyes, but something had changed in her expression. There was a recognition there, a connection that transcended species barriers. "Are you hurt, sweetheart?" Marcus asked her. Zara shook her head, but her eyes filled with tears again. She seemed to be struggling with something, her small hands clenching and unclenching in her lap. "It is remarkable," Healer Vashati observed quietly. "Netherians are typically very social creatures, but trauma can cause them to withdraw completely. She has not responded to any of our medical staff, but she reacts to you." Marcus understood. He had seen it before in war zones, children who had lost everything, clinging to the one person who had shown them safety in their darkest moment. It was a responsibility he didn't take lightly. "Can I?" Marcus started, then winced as pain shot through his side. "Can I sit up properly?" The healer moved forward to adjust his bed, and Marcus slowly shifted to a more upright position. The movement brought him closer to Zara's eye level, and he could see more of her face now. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal, but her eyes held a depth of pain that no child should ever carry. "I know this is scary," Marcus said to her, his voice gentle but steady. "I know you miss your family, and I know everything feels wrong right now, but I want you to know something. You're safe now. I promise you that." Zara's lower lip trembled more noticeably, and one of her 4 hands reached out slightly toward him before she pulled it back. "It's okay," Marcus continued. "You don't have to be brave all the time. Sometimes it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to be sad." That's when it happened. Zara's carefully maintained composure cracked, and tears began streaming down her face. She covered her eyes with 2 of her hands, while the other 2 reached out toward Marcus desperately. Without hesitation, despite the pain in his ribs, Marcus leaned forward and gently took her small hands in his larger, scarred ones. "I'm not crying," Zara whispered in perfectly clear standard, her voice shaky but determined. "You are." Marcus felt his own eyes welling up, and he realized she was right. Tears were sliding down his cheeks, tears for this brave little girl, for her lost family, for all the innocence the galaxy seemed determined to grind up in its endless conflicts. "Yeah," he said softly, squeezing her hands gently. "Yeah, I guess I am." It was the first step in a bond that would change both of their lives forever, though neither of them knew it yet. In that medical bay, surrounded by the soft hum of alien technology and the gentle presence of healer Vashati, a damaged human veteran and a traumatized alien child began to heal each other in ways that medicine alone never could. 3 days passed aboard the Serenity's Grace, and Zara had not left Marcus's side for more than a few minutes. The medical bay had essentially become their shared quarters, with healer Vashati moving a small bed next to Marcus's recovery unit for the child. Marcus was healing faster than the Zalani medical staff had expected. Humans, they discovered, had an unusual capacity for physical recovery that seemed to accelerate under stress. What surprised them more was how Zara had begun to respond to treatment now that Marcus was conscious and present. "Tell me about your species," Marcus asked healer Vashati during one of her routine examinations. Zara was curled up on her small bed, finally sleeping peacefully after days of restless nightmares. Netherians are what you might call empathic connectors, Vashati explained. Her melodic voice kept low. They form deep emotional bonds with family units and become physically ill when separated from their bonded group. In normal circumstances, Zara would have bonded with another Netherian family by now. The fact that she has bonded with you is unusual, Marcus guessed. Unprecedented, Vashati corrected. Cross-species emotional bonding of this depth simply does not occur. Yet her vital signs stabilize when you are present and destabilize when you are not. By all medical logic, she should not be able to survive the loss of her family without another Netherian support structure. Marcus looked at Zara's sleeping form. Even in rest, her two right hands were stretched toward his bed, as if maintaining some invisible connection to him. "What happens to her now?" he asked. "That is complicated. There are no other Netherians in this sector of space. Their colonies are months away by standard travel, and even then, adult Netherians rarely accept orphaned children who have already begun the bonding process with others." The implications hung heavy in the medical bay's recycled air. Marcus understood what Vashati was carefully not saying. Zara might be facing a slow death from emotional isolation, something her species couldn't survive. "There is another matter we must discuss," Vashati continued. "The pirates who attacked your transport have been identified. They are part of the Crimson Reach, a particularly vicious group that has been raiding civilian ships throughout this region." Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew the name. The Crimson Reach had been responsible for several attacks on human colonies during the war. They were opportunists who preyed on the weak and displaced. "Intelligence reports suggest they have been taking prisoners from their raids," Vashati said carefully, "particularly children from various species. The Galactic Council has been unable to locate their base of operations." "You think Zara's family might still be alive?" Marcus said, understanding immediately. "It is possible. However, mounting a rescue operation would require—" Vashati paused, studying Marcus's expression. "It would require someone with extensive military experience and intimate knowledge of human combat tactics." Marcus nearly laughed, but the sound came out bitter. "And you think I'm that someone? Your military records are classified, but your ship's manifest listed you as a former colonial marine. The way you moved through that damaged transport, the tactical decisions you made during the rescue, these suggest significant combat experience." She wasn't wrong. Marcus had been part of the Colonial Marine Elite Reconnaissance Unit for 8 years, 3 of them during the border wars. He had seen more combat than most soldiers saw in a lifetime, and he had been very good at it. Too good, perhaps. It was part of why he had mustered out after the armistice. He had been afraid of what he was becoming. "The Galactic Council would officially disavow any such mission," Vashati continued. "But unofficially, they would provide intelligence support to anyone attempting to rescue those prisoners." "And if the prisoners are already dead?" Marcus asked bluntly. "Then at least the raids would stop. The Crimson Reach has grown bold because no one has been able to strike back effectively. They believe themselves untouchable." Marcus looked at Zara again. She was stirring slightly, making small, distressed sounds in her sleep. Without thinking, he reached over and gently touched one of her outstretched hands. Immediately, she settled back into peaceful rest. "She dreams about her family," Marcus said quietly. "I can tell. She calls out names in her sleep. Mama, Papa, her brother Kex." "Yes," Vashati confirmed. "In Netherian culture, family bonds extend beyond death. She will carry the emotional connection to them for her entire life. If they are alive and she never sees them again, it will cause her constant pain. And if they're dead, then she needs closure, and she needs a new family bond to replace what was lost. Without one or the other—" Vashati let the sentence hang. Marcus understood. Either way, Zara needed him to find her family, or what was left of them. A soft sound from the adjacent bed drew their attention. Zara was sitting up, her golden eyes wide and alert. She looked between Marcus and Vashti with an expression far too knowing for a child her age. "You're talking about the bad people who took my family," she said in her precise, careful standard. Marcus exchanged a glance with Vashti. They had been speaking in low tones, but Netherian hearing was apparently more acute than they had realized. "Yes, little one," Marcus said honestly. "We were talking about them." Zara climbed out of her bed and walked over to Marcus's side. Her 4 hands moved with purpose, 2 of them taking his hand while the other 2 touched the bandages wrapped around his torso. "You're going to go find them," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm thinking about it," Marcus admitted. "I want to go with you." "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately. "It would be too dangerous." Zara's eyes flashed with something that reminded Marcus startlingly of his old drill sergeant. "They took my family. I need to know if they're still alive. I need to help them if they are." "Zara, you're just a child." "I'm old enough to know when adults are trying to protect me from the truth," she interrupted, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "And I'm old enough to know that I'll never be okay if I don't know what happened to them." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. Despite her childlike appearance, there was something ancient and determined in her golden eyes. This wasn't the same terrified little girl he had pulled from that transport 3 days ago. The trauma had changed her, forced her to grow up too quickly, but it had also revealed an inner strength that reminded him of the best soldiers he had served with. "Even if I agreed to take you," Marcus said carefully, "it would be incredibly dangerous. These aren't nice people, Zara. They hurt others for profit, and they wouldn't hesitate to hurt you." "They already did hurt me," Zara replied simply. "They took away everything that mattered to me. The only thing I'm afraid of now is not knowing." Healer Vashti moved forward, her expression concerned. "Child, what you are suggesting is necessary," Zara finished. "In Netherian culture, family bonds must be honored. If my family is alive, I am obligated to help them. If they are dead, I am obligated to see that justice is done. These are not choices. They are requirements." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He recognized the tone in her voice because he had heard it in his own voice countless times during the war. It was the sound of someone who had found their mission, their purpose, regardless of the personal cost. "Besides," Zara added, her voice taking on a slightly different quality, "Netherians have certain abilities that might be useful in a rescue operation." "What kind of abilities?" Marcus asked, intrigued despite himself. Zara looked at Vashti as if asking permission. The healer nodded slowly. "Emotional resonance," Zara explained. "I can sense the feelings of other beings, especially fear and pain. If my family is being held prisoner, I would be able to find them, even if they were hidden." Marcus stared at her. An empathic tracker. In military terms, it was an almost impossibly valuable asset for a rescue operation. "There's more," Zara continued. "Netherians can also project calming emotions to others. It's usually used to comfort family members, but it can be used to influence hostile individuals." "You're talking about a form of mind control," Marcus said slowly. "Emotional influence," Zara corrected. "I can make someone feel drowsy or calm or confused. It only works for a short time, and it only works if I'm close to them, but it could be incredibly useful for infiltration work," Marcus finished. Zara nodded solemnly. "My parents taught me it was only to be used in emergencies to protect family. This qualifies." Marcus looked at this small, determined alien child who was offering to use abilities he barely understood to help him take on a gang of vicious pirates. By all rational standards, it was insane. She was just a kid, and he would be putting her directly in harm's way. But she was also right. If her family was alive, they needed help soon. And if her abilities were as she described them, she might be the difference between a successful rescue and a suicidal assault. "Okay," Marcus said finally, "but we do this my way, with my rules. You follow orders without question, you stay behind me at all times, and if I tell you to run, you run. Agreed?" Zara's face lit up with the first real smile he had seen from her. "Agreed." Healer Vashati looked between them with an expression of mingled admiration and horror. "You are both completely insane," she said quietly. "When do we begin planning?" The asteroid base appeared on their view screen like a cancerous growth in the void. It had once been a mining station, but the Crimson Reach had transformed it into a fortress, bristling with defensive weapons and sensor arrays. Getting close without being detected had required all of Marcus's knowledge of military stealth tactics and a modified infiltration ship provided by Galactic Council intelligence. "Remember the plan," Marcus said quietly, checking his equipment one final time. He wore matte black tactical armor that had been modified to accommodate Zara, who sat secured in a specialized harness on his back. "We go in quiet, locate your family, and extract them without engaging unless absolutely necessary." "I understand," Zara whispered, her 4 small arms wrapped securely around his shoulders. Over the past week of planning and preparation, she had proven herself remarkably composed for someone her age. Her empathic abilities had already helped them avoid 2 pirate patrol ships during their approach. "Guards approaching the docking bay," Zara murmured, her voice taking on the distant quality it got when she was using her abilities. 3 of them. They're bored and tired. One of them is thinking about food." Marcus smiled grimly. Zara's tactical applications of her empathic sensing had exceeded his expectations. She could read emotional states and surface thoughts from a significant distance, giving them intelligence advantages that even military-grade sensors couldn't provide. They docked their ship in an abandoned maintenance bay on the asteroid's dark side. Marcus had spent hours studying the station's original blueprints, identifying service tunnels and forgotten passages that the pirates likely hadn't bothered to secure. Moving through the station was like navigating a maze designed by paranoid criminals. The corridors stank of unwashed bodies and recycled air, with jury-rigged security systems that spoke to the pirates' crude but effective approach to fortress building. "Stop!" Zara whispered urgently. "Camera ahead, around the corner. The person monitoring it is half asleep, but they're still watching." Marcus pressed himself against the wall, thinking. In the old days, he would have used an EMP charge to disable the camera, but that would alert the security system. Instead, he looked at Zara over his shoulder. "Can you put the monitor guard to sleep?" "If I can get closer," she confirmed. "About 10 meters." They crept forward until Zara signaled they were in range. Marcus felt a subtle change in the air around them, like the moment just before a thunderstorm. Zara's breathing became deeper and more rhythmic, and he could sense her focusing her abilities. "Done," she whispered after a few moments. "He'll sleep for about an hour." They moved past the camera and deeper into the station. The layout was becoming clearer to Marcus. This had definitely been a mining operation originally, with the pirates having converted processing chambers into prison cells and barracks. "I can feel them," Zara said suddenly, her voice tight with emotion. "My family. They're alive, Marcus. They're alive and they're scared, but they're alive." Marcus felt his own heart rate spike with adrenaline. The mission had just shifted from a probable recovery operation to an actual rescue. "Where?" "Lower levels. The old ore processing chambers. There are others with them, lots of others, other families from other ships." As they descended through the maintenance shafts, the emotional atmosphere of the station began to affect even Marcus. Zara was trembling against his back, overwhelmed by the fear and despair radiating from the prisoners below. "So many," she whispered, tears in her voice. "Humans, Zelani, Cathari, even some Thorani children. They've been taken prisoners for months." Marcus's jaw clenched. The Thorani were a peaceful species, known for their artistic abilities. The idea of their children being held in this hellhole made something cold and dangerous unfurl in his chest. They reached the lower level and found themselves looking down at a scene that made Marcus's blood boil. The old processing chamber had been converted into a makeshift prison camp, with force field barriers creating individual cells. Dozens of beings of various species huddled in the confined spaces, all showing signs of poor treatment and psychological trauma. "There," Zara breathed, pointing with one of her hands. "That's my mama and papa and my brother Kex." Marcus could see them. 3 Netherians pressed together in one of the smaller cells, their lavender skin pale with stress and malnutrition. Seeing them alive sent a surge of relief through Marcus, followed immediately by tactical assessment of the rescue challenges. "Guards," he muttered, counting. 8 of them, rotating patrol pattern, armed with energy weapons and stun batons. Standard pirate discipline, which means poor. "I can help," Zara said. "I can make some of them sleepy or confused or—" "No," Marcus said firmly. "Too many targets, too spread out. You'd exhaust yourself and we'd still have half of them to deal with." He studied the layout more carefully, his military training taking over completely. "We need a distraction." That's when the alarms started blaring. Red lights bathed the chamber in hellish illumination as a mechanical voice announced, "Intruder alert! All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill." "They found our ship," Marcus realized grimly. So much for stealth. The guards in the prison chamber began shouting orders and checking their weapons. The prisoners cowered in their cells, terror spiking through the emotional atmosphere so strongly that Zara gasped in pain. "Change of plans," Marcus said, his voice taking on the cold, professional tone that had once made enemy soldiers flee in terror. "We go loud." He dropped from the maintenance shaft into the chamber, Zara still secured to his back. The first guard turned toward him just in time to meet Marcus's combat knife. The second guard managed to raise his weapon before Marcus's sidearm put him down permanently. "Contact! Contact!" the remaining guards shouted, but Marcus was already moving. Years of combat experience had taught him that overwhelming violence applied quickly was often more effective than careful planning. The third guard fell to a perfectly placed shot. The fourth managed to fire his energy weapon, the bolt searing past Marcus's shoulder close enough to singe his armor. Marcus's return shot was not a miss. "Zara, now!" Marcus shouted as he dove for cover behind a piece of mining equipment. "Confusion and panic on the remaining guards!" He felt the familiar shift in the air as Zara focused her abilities. The remaining 4 guards suddenly stopped their coordinated response, looking around in bewilderment as their minds became clouded with artificial confusion and creeping panic. Marcus emerged from cover and ended the fight in under 30 seconds. "The force field controls," he called to Zara as he moved toward the security station. "Can you sense where they are?" "The panel by the wall," she said, pointing. "But there's a guard coming down the corridor. No, 3 guards. They're angry and scared." Marcus reached the control panel and began working on the force field generators. His military training had included basic electronics and security systems, knowledge that served him well now. The force fields flickered and died just as the reinforcement guards burst into the chamber. "Everyone down!" Marcus roared in standard, and the freed prisoners immediately dropped to the floor. The incoming guards, expecting to see their comrades in control of the situation, instead found themselves facing a heavily armed human in tactical armor with clear fields of fire. The firefight was brief and decisive. "Mama! Papa! Kex!" Zara called out as Marcus moved through the chamber checking for additional threats. The Nitherian family stumbled out of their former cell, tears streaming down their faces as they reached toward Zara. Marcus knelt carefully, allowing Zara to climb down from his back and run to her family. The reunion was everything he had hoped it would be. 4 sets of lavender arms wrapping around each other in a tangle of relief and joy and love. "More guards coming," Zara called back to him, her voice different now, stronger, more confident, backed by the support of her family bond. 6 of them. But they're confused and scared. They don't understand what happened. "Escape route?" Marcus asked, already moving to help other prisoners out of their cells. "The main corridor?" said a voice behind him. Marcus turned to see a human man, middle-aged and bearing the scars of recent abuse. "I'm Captain Weber, formerly of the merchant vessel Prosperity. They've been keeping me alive to maintain their ship systems. The main corridor leads to the docking bays where they keep captured vessels." "Can you fly?" Marcus asked. "Better than these pirates can," Weber replied grimly, "and I know which ships are flight-ready." "Then we leave. Now." Marcus looked around the chamber at the dozens of freed prisoners, humans, aliens, families with children. "Everyone who can walk, move toward the main corridor. Everyone who can't walk gets carried. No one gets left behind." It should have been chaos, but years of military leadership experience had taught Marcus how to project calm authority in crisis situations. The freed prisoners responded to his commands with desperate hope, organizing themselves into a functional evacuation group with surprising speed. The escape through the station corridors was a running battle. More guards appeared at every turn, but they were dealing with something they had never encountered before: organized resistance led by someone who actually knew what he was doing. Marcus's tactical skills, combined with Zara's empathic abilities and the sheer determination of people fighting for their freedom, proved overwhelming for the poorly trained pirates. They reached the docking bay to find it filled with captured ships from various species. Captain Weber pointed to a large transport vessel. "That one. It's got the fuel and life support capacity for everyone." "Get them aboard," Marcus ordered Weber, then turned to Zara and her family. "You too, get to safety." "What about you?" Zara asked, her golden eyes wide with concern. Marcus looked back toward the station's interior, where alarms were still blaring and emergency lights were flashing. "Someone needs to make sure they can't follow us, and someone needs to make sure this place can't be used to hurt other families." Understanding flashed in Zara's eyes. "You're going to destroy it." "The reactor controls are probably in the main engineering section," Marcus confirmed. "A properly motivated power core overload should take care of the whole station." "I'm coming with you," Zara said immediately. "No," Marcus said firmly. "Your family needs you, and I need to know you're safe." Zara looked at him for a long moment, then stepped forward and wrapped all 4 of her arms around him in a fierce hug. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for saving me, for believing in me, for helping me save them." Marcus hugged her back, feeling something tight in his chest finally loosen. "Thank you for reminding me what we fight for." The station's destruction was visible from space, a brilliant flash that briefly outshone the local star before fading into expanding debris. Marcus made it to the transport ship with barely 2 minutes to spare, carrying a data core filled with intelligence about other Crimson Reach operations. As their ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying its cargo of freed prisoners toward safety, Marcus found himself sitting in the common area surrounded by families reuniting, children laughing, people planning their futures again. Zara climbed up onto the bench beside him, her family nearby but giving them a moment together. "So what happens now?" she asked. Marcus considered the question. A week ago, he had been a burned-out veteran trying to forget a war that had taken everything from him. Now he was surrounded by people whose lives had been saved, families restored, children given back their futures. Now I think we find more people who need help, he said quietly. Zara smiled, the bright, unreserved smile of a child who had found her family and her purpose in the same day. Good, she said, settling against his side. I was hoping you'd say that. Looking around at the freed prisoners, humans and aliens working together, sharing food and stories and hope, Marcus realized that maybe his war hadn't ended after all. Maybe it had just found a better reason to continue. The galaxy was full of predators who preyed on the innocent, but it was also full of people willing to stand up for each other regardless of species or origin. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. The Starship Salvation sat like a metal corpse in the scrapyard of Nexus Station, its hull scarred by decades of neglect and the cruel touch of cosmic radiation. Captain Marcus Chen walked around the massive vessel, his boots crunching on the debris-littered ground as he examined every dent, every patch of rust, every flickering light that still showed signs of life. "You're insane if you think that bucket of bolts can fly again," said Corvex, the Zenthari station master, his four arms gesturing wildly at the derelict ship. His scaled blue skin rippled with amusement as he watched the human inspect what others had written off as space junk. 3 different shipping companies tried to restore her. All failed. The Galactic Salvage Union declared her a total loss 5 years ago. Marcus ran his hand along a section of the hull where the original silver paint still gleamed beneath layers of grime. The Salvation had been a beauty once, a heavy cargo hauler built by the legendary Terran Dynamics Corporation before the company went bankrupt. She was old even by human standards, but her bones were solid, her frame built to last centuries instead of the planned obsolescence that plagued modern vessels. "How much?" Marcus asked, ignoring the alien's warnings. Corvex's membrane-covered eyes widened in disbelief. "You cannot be serious. The ship is worthless. The quantum drives are burned out, the life support systems are completely shot, and don't get me started on the navigation array. It would take more credits than you could ever hope to earn to make her space-worthy again." "How much?" Marcus repeated, his voice steady and determined. The Zenthari made a sound that might have been laughter or exasperation. "Fine, crazy human. If you want to throw your money away, I'll take 50,000 credits, but I'm telling you, you'd be better off burning that money for warmth." Marcus pulled out his data pad and transferred the credits without hesitation. He had been saving for years, working as a freelance pilot on milk runs and courier jobs throughout the Outer Rim. Every credit he earned went into his account, waiting for the right opportunity. This rust bucket might not look like much to others, but Marcus saw potential where they saw only problems. "The title transfers to you immediately," Corvex said, still shaking his head. "Don't come crying to me when you realize what a mistake you've made. The docking fees are already 3 months behind, by the way. Another 15,000 credits." Marcus paid that too, much to the alien's surprise. As he walked back toward the ship, he could hear Corvex muttering to his assistant about crazy humans and their tendency to throw good money after bad. But Marcus had spent weeks studying the Salvation's schematics, reading maintenance reports, and talking to the few engineers who had worked on previous restoration attempts. He knew exactly what he was getting into. The ship's airlock groaned as it opened, the sound echoing through the vast cargo bay like the cry of some ancient beast awakening from a long sleep. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the cavernous space, revealing the scope of the work ahead. Cables hung like dead serpents from the ceiling. Control panels displayed error messages in a dozen different languages, and the smell of ozone and decay filled the recycled air. Marcus made his way to the bridge, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The command center was a monument to outdated technology, with physical switches and analog displays that most modern pilots would find primitive. But Marcus had grown up on ships like this, had learned to fly on vessels where you could feel the engines through the deck plates and hear the whisper of air through the life support systems. He settled into the captain's chair and began running diagnostics on every system he could access. The results were predictably grim. Main engines offline, backup power at 12%, navigation systems corrupted, artificial gravity failing in 3 sections. The list went on for pages, each line representing thousands of credits in repairs and replacement parts. But Marcus wasn't discouraged. He had a plan that went beyond simply fixing what was broken. While other species had moved toward standardized, disposable ships built by massive corporations, humans still remembered the value of durability and adaptability. The Salvation was built in an era when ships were meant to be repaired, modified, and improved, rather than replaced. Over the following weeks, Marcus worked 18-hour days in the ship's depths. He started with the basics, rerouting power systems and patching life support until he could work without an environmental suit. He scavenged parts from other derelicts in the yard, traded labor for components, and slowly began bringing the old ship back to life. Other pilots at the station thought he was wasting his time. The Cortani Shipping Guild laughed when they heard about the human who bought a dead ship. The Vex traders made jokes about human stubbornness being stronger than human sense. Even the dock workers placed bets on how long it would take for Marcus to give up and sell the ship for scrap. Marcus ignored them all. He had learned long ago that other species often underestimated human determination. They saw his efforts as foolish persistence, unable to understand that humans had built their entire civilization on the principle that anything could be fixed, improved, or repurposed with enough effort and creativity. The breakthrough came when Marcus discovered something the previous restoration teams had missed. Hidden beneath decades of jury-rigged modifications was the ship's original adaptive systems architecture. The Salvation hadn't just been built to carry cargo, she had been designed as a multi-role platform capable of rapid reconfiguration for different missions. Her cargo bays could be converted into manufacturing spaces, her sensor arrays could be upgraded for exploration, her engine compartments could house additional power generators. For the first time since buying the ship, Marcus smiled as he realized what he truly owned. This wasn't just an old cargo hauler, it was a foundation upon which he could build something entirely new. 6 months after purchasing the Salvation, Marcus had transformed the ship from a derelict into something resembling a functional vessel. The engines hummed with renewed life. The life support systems maintained perfect atmosphere, and the navigation array could plot courses with military precision. But Marcus wasn't content with simply making the ship operational again. He had bigger plans. The first modification came when a desperate Thalaxian merchant approached him with an unusual cargo request. The merchant needed to transport live crystal formations that required specific temperature and pressure conditions, something that traditional cargo ships couldn't accommodate without expensive specialized containers. Instead of turning down the job, Marcus spent 3 days reconfiguring one of the Salvation's cargo bays into a climate-controlled environment using the ship's adaptive systems. The job paid well, but more importantly, it gave Marcus an idea. While other shipping companies were locked into rigid service categories by their standardized vessels, the Salvation could adapt to handle almost any type of cargo or mission. He began advertising his services as adaptive logistics, taking on jobs that other pilots couldn't or wouldn't handle. Word spread quickly through the shipping networks about the human pilot who could transport anything, anywhere, under any conditions. Marcus found himself hauling temperature-sensitive medical supplies to plague-stricken colonies, carrying fragile alien artworks that required zero-gravity storage, and even transporting live specimens for xenobiological research stations. Each job taught him something new about different species' needs and preferences. The Zephyrians valued speed above all else. So Marcus configured the ship's engines for maximum acceleration on their routes. The Mollusk Consortium needed moisture-controlled environments, which he created using modified atmospheric processors. The Crystalline Shard Collective required electromagnetic shielding that he built using salvaged military hardware. But Marcus's real innovation came when he realized that many of the modifications he made for specific jobs didn't need to be removed afterward. Instead of returning the ship to its original configuration between contracts, he began accumulating capabilities. The Salvation became a Swiss Army knife of the shipping industry, able to handle multiple types of specialized cargo simultaneously. The turning point came when the Galactic Emergency Response Authority contacted him about a rescue mission that had stumped their regular fleet. A research station in the Helix Nebula had suffered catastrophic life support failure, but the station was surrounded by electromagnetic storms that disabled most ships' navigation systems. The researchers trapped inside had maybe 48 hours of air remaining. 3 different rescue ships had already tried and failed to reach the station. Their modern, computer-dependent navigation systems couldn't function in the nebula's chaotic electromagnetic environment. But the Salvation still had her original analog backup systems, designed in an era when human pilots flew by instinct and experience, rather than relying solely on computer guidance. Marcus stripped out every non-essential electronic system and flew the ship like pilots had done centuries earlier, using manual calculations and dead reckoning to navigate through the storm. When he reached the research station, he discovered another problem. The docking ports had been damaged, making a standard rescue impossible. While other ships would have been forced to retreat, Marcus used the Salvation's adaptive systems to create a solution on the spot. He reconfigured one of the cargo bays into an improvised airlock, used the ship's external manipulator arms to cut through the station's hull, and created a sealed tunnel between the 2 vessels. In less than 6 hours, he had evacuated all 47 researchers and their critical data. The rescue made him famous throughout the galaxy. News networks called it the miracle of the Helix Nebula, and Marcus found himself inundated with job offers from clients willing to pay premium rates for his unique services. But fame brought scrutiny, and not everyone was pleased with the human success. The Vorthan Shipping Syndicate, one of the largest cargo companies in the galaxy, saw Marcus as a threat to their standardized business model. They filed complaints with the Galactic Commerce Authority, claiming that the Salvation's non-standard modifications violated safety regulations. They lobbied for new rules that would force ships to maintain factory configurations. Marcus fought back by demonstrating that his modifications actually made the ships safer and more efficient than standard vessels. He opened the Salvation to inspection by independent engineering firms, published detailed specifications of his adaptive systems, and even offered to train other pilots in his techniques. The transparency only increased demand for his services. Corporate competitors weren't his only challenge. Many alien species harbored deep-seated prejudices about human technological capabilities. They saw humans as crude innovators who built things through trial and error rather than careful engineering. The idea that a human could outperform their sophisticated vessels rankled their sense of superiority. A group of Zenthari shipping executives publicly challenged Marcus to a cargo run competition, confident that their newest automated freighters could outperform his primitive ship. The challenge involved transporting a mixed cargo load from Nexus Station to the industrial world of Ferox Prime, including live animals, hazardous chemicals, and delicate electronics. Marcus accepted immediately. While the Zenthari ships struggled to accommodate the diverse cargo requirements using separate specialized containers, Marcus reconfigured the Salvation's cargo bays to handle everything in a single integrated environment. He created isolated atmospheric zones for different cargo types, installed adaptive shielding to protect sensitive equipment, and designed a biocontainment system for the live animals. The race wasn't even close. Marcus reached Ferox Prime 18 hours ahead of the nearest competitor and delivered his cargo in perfect condition, while 2 of the Zenthari ships suffered failures that damaged their loads. The victory silenced most of his critics and established his reputation as something more than just a lucky pilot. But success brought new responsibilities. Marcus began receiving requests not just for shipping services, but for specialized engineering solutions. Mining companies wanted him to adapt their equipment for hostile environments. Research institutions needed custom modifications for their exploration vessels. Even military contractors started approaching him with classified projects. Each project expanded his knowledge and capabilities. Marcus learned advanced metallurgy from the Corvin engineers, studied exotic matter physics with Thalaxian scientists, and mastered biomechanical integration techniques from the symbiotic Nereid species. The Salvation became a floating laboratory where cutting-edge modifications were tested and perfected. Marcus also began hiring crew members, carefully selecting individuals who shared his vision of adaptive innovation. His chief engineer was a brilliant mollusk named Kef, who could design solutions to problems that hadn't been invented yet. His communications officer was a former Vorthon corporate executive who had grown tired of the restrictions of standardized thinking. Together, they transformed the Salvation from a one-ship operation into the flagship of something much larger. Marcus wasn't just running a shipping company anymore. He was pioneering an entirely new approach to space commerce that valued flexibility and innovation over standardization and efficiency. 2 years after the rescue at Helix Nebula, Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of Adaptation Station, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on the newest addition to his growing fleet. The shipyard that had once been nothing more than empty space now buzzed with activity as dozens of vessels underwent modifications using the techniques he had pioneered aboard the Salvation. The old cargo hauler still served as his flagship, but she was no longer alone. Marcus had acquired 17 other ships over the past year, each one a so-called hopeless case that other companies had written off as beyond repair. Where others saw scrap metal, Marcus saw potential. His growing team of engineers and technicians had become masters at breathing new life into vessels that everyone else had abandoned. The transformation hadn't gone unnoticed by the galaxy's power brokers. 3 months earlier, the Galactic Commerce Authority had officially recognized Marcus's company, Adaptive Logistics, as a major shipping corporation. The same organization that had once investigated him for safety violations now held up his operation as a model for sustainable business practices. Marcus's success had fundamentally changed how the galaxy thought about space commerce. The old model of purpose-built single-function vessels was giving way to a new paradigm of adaptive, multi-role ships that could evolve to meet changing market demands. Major corporations were scrambling to retrofit their fleets with modular systems, trying to catch up to innovations that had started in the cargo bay of a derelict ship. But Marcus's influence extended far beyond shipping. His techniques for rapid reconfiguration and adaptive engineering had revolutionized everything from orbital habitats to deep space mining operations. The Corvin Syndicate had licensed his atmospheric processing modifications for their colony ships. The Thalaxian Science Directorate used his sensor array designs for their exploration vessels. Even the secretive Phantom Legion had quietly contracted Adaptive Logistics to upgrade their stealth ships. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that the same alien species who had once mocked human engineering were now paying premium rates for human innovation. What they had dismissed as crude ingenuity had proven to be exactly what the galaxy needed: practical solutions to real problems, implemented with determination and creativity rather than rigid adherence to established protocols. The communications array chimed, interrupting his thoughts. His aide, a sharp-minded Vex named Zara, appeared on the holographic display with the latest status report. Sir, we've received formal requests from 43 different systems for emergency logistics support following the quantum storm in the Andromeda sector. The Galactic Emergency Response Authority is asking if we can coordinate the relief effort. Marcus nodded. Natural disasters had become one of his specialties, not because he sought them out, but because Adaptive Logistics was often the only organization capable of responding quickly to unprecedented challenges. When the crystalline plague had threatened to wipe out the Shard Collective's homeworld, Marcus's ships had delivered experimental treatments through radiation storms that grounded conventional fleets. When terrorist attacks had crippled the fuel distribution network in the inner systems, his modified tankers had kept entire star systems from going dark. "Tell them we'll have a response fleet assembled within 6 hours," Marcus said. "Route the mission through the Salvation. I want to personally oversee this one." Disasters weren't profitable in the traditional sense, but they served a larger purpose in Marcus's growing empire. Every successful emergency response demonstrated the superiority of adaptive systems over rigid infrastructure. Every impossible mission completed by his crews proved that human approaches to problem-solving could succeed where conventional methods failed. The real money came from the consulting contracts that followed each high-profile success. Corporations throughout the galaxy now paid enormous fees for adaptive logistics engineers to review their operations and suggest improvements. Marcus's team had redesigned everything from manufacturing processes to planetary defense systems, applying the same principles of flexibility and innovation that had transformed the Salvation. But perhaps his greatest achievement was the establishment of the Adaptive Engineering Institute on Nexus Station. The same space where the Salvation had once sat as an abandoned derelict now housed a prestigious academy that trained engineers and pilots from dozens of different species in the principles of adaptive design. Students came from across the galaxy to learn techniques that couldn't be found in any textbook. The Institute's graduation ceremony had become a major event, attended by corporate executives, government officials, and military leaders who competed to recruit the newest graduates. Many of the galaxy's most innovative engineers now proudly displayed certificates from Marcus's academy. The success of the Institute had also helped heal some of the cultural tensions that had initially surrounded Marcus's rise to prominence. Young aliens who studied human engineering techniques gained a deep appreciation for the creativity and determination that characterized human problem-solving. They returned to their home systems as ambassadors for a new way of thinking about technology and innovation. Marcus's personal fortune had grown beyond anything he had imagined when he first walked around the Salvation's rusted hull. Financial analysts estimated his net worth in the hundreds of millions of credits, but the real measure of his success was the transformation he had brought to galactic commerce. Efficiency ratings across all shipping networks had improved dramatically as companies adopted adaptive techniques. Emergency response times had been cut in half. Even the rate of technological innovation had accelerated as engineers embraced human approaches to creative problem-solving. The old prejudices hadn't completely disappeared, but they were becoming increasingly irrelevant. Results spoke louder than species bias, and Marcus's results were impossible to ignore. The Zenthari shipping syndicate, once his fiercest competitor, had quietly approached him about a merger. The Vorthan corporate alliance had offered to buy adaptive logistics outright for more money than some planetary governments possessed. Marcus had turned down every offer. Money wasn't the point anymore. It never really had been. What mattered was proving that the human approach, that willingness to see potential where others saw only problems, could change the galaxy for the better. Standing on his observation deck, watching his crews prepare for another impossible mission, Marcus thought back to that first day when Corvex had called him crazy for wanting to save a worthless old ship. The Zenthari had been wrong about many things, but perhaps most importantly, he had misunderstood what humans meant by worthless. Nothing was worthless if you had the vision to see what it could become and the determination to make that vision reality. The galaxy was finally beginning to understand that lesson, one impossible mission at a time.